Welcome to Daily Dose Radio, a 5-minute devotional podcast studying the Psalms verse by verse. Broadcast from the ever-beautiful Sharonville, Ohio, on the sunny side of Cincinnati. Hey, welcome back to Daily Dose Radio. This week we've been looking at Psalm 113, the great person of God. We've read verses 1 through 4, and we've looked at the greatness of his person, his name, why it is praiseworthy, blessed, eternal, his nature, that is, he's sovereign over everything, over all of creation, over all the created order, and over everything that men have made. So now we come to verse 5, and yesterday I teased you a little bit with verse 5, because verse 5 acts as a pause, as a break in the flow of this psalm, the energy of the psalm. It slows down right here at 5, because the psalmist uses the interrogative. He asks a question, "Who is like unto the Lord our God, who dwelleth on high?" That makes you stop and reflect on what's just been said. Well, if we take into account the testimony of everything that we have here in verses 1 through 4, there is no one like the Lord our God. And if we recall and remember all that he's done for his people in the past, well, there's certainly no one like the Lord our God. And if we think about all the blessing, future blessing that's coming via Messiah, well, of course, there is no one like the Lord our God. That's the idea the psalmist is trying to create here. It's a pause. And 5 is positioned very nicely in this psalm. It's right smack dab in the middle of this psalm. There are 8 lines of verse above verse 5, and there are 8 lines of verse after verse 5. Now that's excluding the first hallelujah and the last hallelujah. So 8 above it, 8 below it, right in the middle. It makes you pause. Who is like this God? Because his person is great. We've just discussed that. Okay. So, what comes after 5? Well, his mercy is great as well. Notice, who humbleth himself to behold the things that are in heaven and in earth. Now, we just talked about how he's above heaven and earth, how he's greater than the glory of all the nations, how the sovereignty of God reigns over everything that's touched by the rising and setting of the sun, which is everything, is, supposed to be praising the Lord daily. So he's greater than all of that. Yet, notice 6, he humbles himself. That is, he bows down to look and get the picture of he's above all of heaven and earth, and so he's bending down to peek inside, to see what there is in heaven and earth, because he's so great, he's so high above it, that he has to look down and he has to humble himself to look in. So he's humbling himself to behold the things that are in heaven and in earth. You remember how the psalmist uses the phrase, "incline your ear"? That's the idea here, that he's bending over, he's bending down to hear us. And he's putting his hand up to his ear so he can listen to all the sweetness of the prayer that's being raised to him, because he loves to hear our prayers. Well, he's humbling himself to behold the things that are in heaven and earth, because even as his glory is above the heaven, so he's not so marvelous that he can't bow down and humble himself to behold the things that are in heaven and earth. So, while his person is great, yet his mercy towards us is even greater. And what we're going to have in 7, 8, and 9 is a description of his greatness declared through the mercy that he shows his created order. So he's able to be the God who is above all things, and yet be the God who is able to humble himself and see what's going on with even the very lowest of people. And then he's going to describe those people here in verses 7, 8, and 9. So I hope you'll join me tomorrow as we look at 7 and 8 on Daily Dose Radio. Thanks for listening to Daily Dose Radio. I'm David Smith. The music today has been performed by the Bluegrass Experiment. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time on Daily Dose Radio.